What's up? What's up? I'm Dr. Omatma, host of Egg Meets Sperm, where we're busting fertility myths, sharing tangible tips for your fertility journey, and bringing you the most knowledgeable guests to support your journey to parenthood. This podcast is for both women and men because getting fertile as fuck is for both partners, don't you think? Remember, just listening to this podcast won't get you pregnant, but following the tips we share just may. Let's get you fertile AF so that you can co-create the family you dream of. And if your partner's not listening to this, make sure to share this episode with your partner. Hello and welcome to Egg Meets Sperm. I'm your host, Dr. Omatma, and my guest today is Michelle Oravitz. She is a FABORM, which is a special training and board certification for acupuncturists that focus on fertility. So she comes from a Chinese medicine background. She's also an Ayurvedic practitioner and a certified hypnotherapist specializing in fertility health. Michelle was inspired to change her career from architecture to acupuncture after having her own reproductive imbalances resolved by her acupuncturist. Her method of treatment encompasses not only herbs and acupuncture, but also incorporates diet, supplements, essential oils, and most importantly, the mind and how it influences conception. She helps women and couples both online as well as in person, and is the host of the Wholesome Fertility podcast. Welcome, Michelle. I'm so excited to talk to you today.
Thank you so much, Dr. Omatma. I was so excited to be here.
Yes. So I'm really excited to dive into this, and we actually haven't talked about it on the podcast yet. So tell me like the Chinese medicine perspective of fertility and what's happening.
So, generally speaking, fertility is seen as really a reflection of overall health in Chinese medicine. And one of the things that we learn as practitioners, especially like, for example, with women, regardless of what they come in for, we always talk about the menstrual cycle because the menstrual cycle could tell you a lot about what's going on in the body. And the way we approach health in general, that we look at patterns. So we don't treat the symptom, we look at pattern because you can have one symptom and then have maybe 5 different patterns causing that symptom.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's not so much about the symptoms that people are experiencing, but what's happening under the surface. So, what are some of the common patterns that you see in Chinese medicine?
Well, one really common one, it's funny because anyone who knows this will laugh because it's really almost everybody's pattern is liver qi
Can I guess?
stagnation.
Oh, liver
Oh,
qi.
sorry.
Okay. I was going to say spleen qi.
Well, you know what? That's another one. That's another one because that's the gut. But liver qi stagnation is just stress. It's like your body constricting because the liver is in charge of the free flow of qi, which is life force vitality. People call it energy. Energy is part of it, but it's really life force vitality. It's really what brings us to life. And so the liver's in charge of moving that and giving that free flow. So it's kind of like, okay, this direction. And then when we start to constrict, we're basically stopping the liver from doing its job. So it starts to stagnate and it can cause PMS, irritability, stress. A lot of people, when they talk about how people hold tension in their shoulders, that's a liver qi stagnation thing.
That's me.
Eventually can cause, so many people like it can eventually, it may cause migraines when it goes further down the line. So a lot of times it starts out like patterns start out almost like innocently. It's just like kind of something goes a little off and then your body wants to bring it back. What happens is when it persists and it becomes chronic, then it starts to get further and further along and the symptoms get more severe.
Wow. Okay. So liver qi stagnation, and then we have spleen qi deficiency. Can you break down that one? Because we hear,
Yep.
I'm sure everybody has
Absolutely.
heard that one.
Yep. So actually, the liver, they all have relationships. So the liver, the spleen, the kidneys, like all these different organs have elements and they all have relationships and how they interact with each other. So with the liver, if the liver is too much, it actually could impact the spleen. So if you ever felt nauseous when you're nervous or stressed out, it actually
Mm.
has a connection with the spleen. So it can overact. They say that overact on the spleen. And people, when they get really nervous, can also, this is irritable bowel syndrome explained. So it can really impact the spleen. So in Chinese medicine, the spleen is different than Western medicine describes it. The spleen and stomach are paired organs of yin and yang, spleen being yin and stomach being yang. And they really are the core of digestive health. And they're also really important for not only absorbing nutrients, really taking it in, absorbing it correctly, putting the nutrients where they need to go, and then also creating blood. Especially blood is so important for fertility health,
Hmm.
not just to nourish the ovaries, nourish the uterine lining, really getting a good menstrual cycle. But we also lose blood every month. We have to think about that too. So we need to make the blood. And so a lot of times I see women being blood deficient in my
Mm.
office.
Hmm. Yeah, and that's somewhat different and maybe potentially deeper than just iron deficiency, right? Can we talk about that for a second? So
Yep,
it's like, I feel like a lot of times people hear Chinese medicine stuff and then they bring it in and they're like, oh, does that mean I have anemia? Should I take
totally.
iron? And I'm like, that's part of it, but
Yes.
there's probably way more there.
So when Chinese medicine perceives it or sees it, or a practitioner looks and becomes aware, like something's a little off here, person's not making blood from perspective, it is like way before it gets to the point where a person becomes anemic, if that makes sense. So
Mm-hmm.
we can perceive things before they actually are perceived in from the subtleties of symptoms and the experiences that the person has.
Mm-hmm. So basically, they may not show anything on a blood panel or a blood test, but you can sense it and feel it in their pulse and all of that kind of stuff.
Correct.
Okay. So you mentioned yin and yang, and that was going to be my next topic. So, what is yin and yang, and how does that relate to reproductive health?
So, yin and yang are basically the core of all living things here on earth. Everything in life, with our elements and our laws, really, of nature. Because if you think about it, probably many planets have different laws of nature. Ours, it really comes down to the yin and yang balance. It has to be balanced. If you look at even what Western medicine says about homeostasis, and how the body will compensate if something, the temperature goes up, it cools itself down, it by sweating. Everything is really designed to create that homeostasis. So when yin and yang are balanced, I'm kind of using terms that are Western medicine or kind of conventional medicine and Chinese medicine, but really to describe the same thing. In order for life to happen, we need the balance of the yin and yang. That's why we have night, we have day. If we have too much day, everything would dry out and burn out, and it just wouldn't work. It's important to have that rhythm. And so having that balance in general is, once we kind of come to that understanding that that is really what life can thrive on, is that balance. And if we have an imbalance, it can give rise to disease or imbalance of general hormonal imbalance. It's not necessarily disease. Everything's a gradient, so you can start having more, it gets worse and worse with time if it's not resolved. And how does that fertility? Oh, in so many ways. If you think about the circadian rhythm and how our circadian rhythm can actually impact our infradian rhythm or menstrual cycle, and there have been links with that. If you look at some PCOS patients, they actually have circadian disruption or imbalances. So it's really important to have that balance and that rhythm, because our bodies have that rhythm as well. So it has its ups, it has its downs. If you look at like the menstrual cycle, which is really the core of fertility, you look at the follicular cycle, it's a little more yin. And what happens during that time, many people, they will sync up with the moon as well. So the rhythms of the moon, which is all, again, it's a rhythm, it's a pattern, it's an up and a down. And if you look at like the follicular phase, which is the first day of your menstrual cycle or your period, your bleed, to the time of ovulation, that's more of a yin time. That's when we're after depleting the yin through losing blood, and then we build back up. So we're building back up, and estrogen rises. Estrogen is considered a yin hormone. And it also, we get more cervical mucus around that time. And has moisture. Yang is more dry. And then we get to this point of this kind of peak yin, and then it goes to this peak yang, or it increases into yang when you go into the second part of the cycle, which is after the ovulation into the first day of your next cycle. And that your temperature rises, and that's a yang thing because yang is more heating. And that's when progesterone peaks, and that is also a yang hormone because it does bring your temperature up. So it's really amazing to see how that plays out in our bodies, and how sometimes we'll do is if a person has a short luteal phase, we'll give them yang herbs to increase that. And it actually does increase that second part of their cycle. It's really, really fascinating.
That's so cool. That's really cool. I think the energetics of things is just amazing, right? There was one, I want to backtrack because you said something really key and something that I talk about, I think, too much from the Western medicine side, which is the circadian rhythm and its connection to the infradian rhythm. So I find that those might be new words for people.
Yes. So thank you for reminding me.
So circadian rhythm is your sleep-wake cycle. That's relatively easy. Most of us know that word. Let's talk about infradian rhythm. What is that?
Okay, so the infradian rhythm is the longer cycle. So if you think about the hands of a clock, so like the circadian rhythm could be compared to the second hand, and I'm just kind of saying like second hand, it could be a minute hand, but look at like the hour hand. So it's basically all of that, it's connected. But then if you look at the larger ones, the hour hand, that could be compared to the monthly rhythm. So that could be like your monthly cycle or the moon as it goes from like new moon to full moon.
Yeah. So the infradian rhythm is basically the fluctuation of your female hormones through the course of a menstrual month.
Yeah. So it's a larger rhythm versus like a
The
day versus
24-hour
a month.
rhythm. Yes. Okay. So what is the connection? From what you've seen, what do you find is the impact of the circadian rhythm on the infradian rhythm?
So do I know the exact mechanisms? No, but I know that it's almost like the second hand of a clock. Like, so if the second is off, it's going to impact the larger rhythm, but it does impact our sleep. And our sleep, it's important to sleep within certain hours. We do have in Chinese medicine clocks or like hours. Every hour impacts a different organ. And once we get past a certain time, it actually throws off our internal rhythm for that night and we wake up. So if you ever notice, like if you go to sleep by a certain time, you will fall asleep more easily. If you stay up past like 11, all of a sudden you get like the second wind and you wake up. So you get thrown off. So having that normal cycle, first of all, impacts your hormones. It impacts your body's ability to regenerate and replenish. And you do feel a difference when you sleep at night versus when you sleep during the day. And they have seen correlations between women with PCOS that have irregular menstrual cycles and having circadian rhythm dysfunction. So it is kind of interesting, and I do see it in my office as well. People who have menstrual irregularities are also not tuned with their sleep-wake cycle within the 24 hours. So I find that an interesting correlation, and I think that that's what we're seeing. We're seeing correlation between that. And to me, it's just as simple as looking at like a clock. And if one part of that clock is missing or is not on track, it's going to impact the rest of the clock. And we also see a correlation between the moon. So when we talk about light, we are really impacted by light as individuals. And it's not just the light of the sun, but it's also the light of the moon. And the light of the moon impacts the night sky throughout the month, and it will shift. And so most people will cycle with the moon. So they'll get their period with a new moon. It's like this cleansing. And if you think about the high tides and the full moon, they'll ovulate with the full moon. That's when we also have more cervical mucus. Think about that. Like the more water comes out,
Yeah, isn't
And
it
I
crazy?
happen to be a blood mooner, so I was flipped.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I was flipped, and some people do flip, and it does happen. And there's many theories to that, but they said like sometimes back in the day, women used to blood mooners were more like the medicine women. There were like fewer, and they used to take care of the women. The majority of the women that did cycle with a new moon, they would get their period on the new moon
Hmm.
and ovulate with the full moon. So yeah, so I do often tell people to look at the moon
Hmm.
at night as part of a rhythm to really is their eyes to the light. And also keep in mind we have a lot of artificial light, so that can throw things off, and it's good to dim it at night.
Yeah, absolutely. Blue light blockers, you guys. Like, get some blue light
Yep, totally.
blockers, especially if you're at your
Yeah.
computer or watching TV at night. That's a really good idea. And I like this. This is really cool. So it's just landing for me what you said, which is to look at the moon to
Hmm.
reset to that light
Yep.
and reset to the energy of the moon. That sounds awesome because I'm also a blood mooner.
Yeah, me too. Me too. And it's okay to be a blood mooner. Like, I think it's because we're medicine women.
Yeah, and I think so. And I've also heard when we're in that phase of creation that isn't of child, it's even more natural to be on the blood moon cycle because we're creating out in the world rather than
Ooh, I love
babies.
that. It's great. That's cool.
That's what I
I love it. I'll take it.
say. Okay, I love this conversation so much. It's awesome. I'm curious. I know you've studied Ayurveda as well. So I'm curious how different or similar is it to Chinese medicine and the kind of patterns that you would see in Chinese medicine versus what you would see in Ayurveda?
Good question. Yeah, Ayurveda is really cool. It also, a lot of Ayurveda for me was, we also discussed herbs, and a lot of it's physical work. It's a lot of physical treatments that you could
Mhm.
do using oils on the body to balance out. But really, both of them, the similarities is that it's balancing out elements in the body. So,
Mhm.
like, people will tend to have more fire, and the same thing with Chinese medicine. That's one of the ways that we look at the patterns. If people have more fire, less earth, then we give them more earth foods. Ayurveda was a little stronger on nutrition. From learned nutrition in Chinese medicine, but a little bit, not a ton. Something that if you want to learn more, you can learn more after school, but it wasn't like something that they gave us. But Ayurveda, it's huge.
Mhm.
Food is really big. Like they talk a lot about food, and not just food, but the nature of food. And there's even cookbooks on if you're a Vata, Pitta,
Mhm.
Kapha. So Vata,
Mhm.
Pitta, Kapha are the three body types. Vata tends to be more ether and air. Pitta is more fire, and then also kapha, which is more earth. And they have other elements as well. Most people are either two combined, so like vata kapha, kapha vata, depending, like the first one would be the more predominant one,
Mhm.
or vata pitta, pitta vata, and so forth. And a lot of times there are people, they're tridoshic, and there are foods that are tridoshic and help all three. And so they work a lot on basically foods and also herbs to balance that out with internally. And then there's
Mhm.
also, they do a lot of enemas with specific medicated enemas to like really clear out and clean out certain diets, and a lot of body work, Shirodara, like a lot of physical body work. I don't do the treatments. And that was one of the things that I felt missing because I wasn't interested in doing like the massage aspect,
Yeah.
which is very powerful. It just wasn't something that I wanted to do personally. That's
Yeah.
one of the reasons I wanted to go to school and study acupuncture,
Mhm.
because I felt like that was my physical thing to do the
Mhm.
acupuncture. And acupuncture, they do the meridian points or some other points. Sometimes they're just individual, not belonging to a meridian.
Yeah.
And in Ayurveda, they talk about marma points, and they use a
Mhm.
lot of massage and pressure to those points. So they're like cousins. I mean, they're very related, but
Yeah.
they're a little different. And I feel like Ayurveda is maybe a little more feminine. There's a
Mhm.
little bit more nutrition, especially the way it's taught now. There's a little more touch,
Mhm.
and it's a little more feminine in just how I feel and how I perceive it. And acupuncture could be a little more clinical feeling
Mhm.
and a little more male to
Mhm.
me.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really interesting. I agree. I feel like the similarities of just understanding what your body is inherently, what's out of whack, and how to bring it in balance. And I think that
Yeah.
both of those systems do that really well
Yeah.
in terms of how can I use this knowledge to optimize and like bring more balance into my body so that I can get to wherever it is that I want to get to.
Exactly.
With
And
most
there's
of our
one,
clients making
yeah,
babies, but
exactly. One important point that I wanted to mention just about both modalities and really Chinese medicine as a whole and how it sees even like impacts for fertility is that the way they look at the body, and I'm sure you know this too, because I think in naturopathic medicine, they talk about this, is that the body's a self-healing machine. It basically knows how to do its thing. It's designed to
Mhm.
self-heal. And it's not so much us healing the body, it's about us creating that state of balance so that the body can optimally heal itself.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree 100%. It's like the body can heal itself. And I think in naturopathic medicine, the way that we phrase it is like removing the obstacles to cure, which is get out of the way
Yeah,
instead
totally.
of
Get that
like,
junk out.
yeah, like instead of let's overload you and give you these medications and then you have more reactions and you're like, oh, great, now I need more medications instead of just
Exactly.
like, how do we effectively remove things that are in the way so that healing can happen on its own?
Exactly.
Yeah, I love that. I imagine that you've been doing this a long time. There are stories that you could tell us. What is a client story that you just were like, oh, it was a moment?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like,
Yes, I have one that I adore. Her still comes in and on her second pregnancy, but I'll start from the beginning. So she had so many things going against her, and she's tried to conceive for over a year before coming to me. And she has type 1 diabetes, rheumatoid arthritis. I think she even had like a thyroid antibodies, lots of autoimmune conditions going on. And she ended up going to getting checked like one thing after the next. And then finally she came to me. And in the beginning, it was very hesitant. I could feel the result. Told her to avoid gluten and certain foods. She looked like at me. She was like, oh, she was not happy. But she eventually did. And then came in. And after a couple of months, sent me a text, you're a miracle worker, and a positive pregnancy test. And I was so happy. And I will not forget the day she came in. And because she was seeing also a reproductivist and they were checking her labs. And she came in one day and got on the phone. They were calling her back about the beta, and the beta dropped. And they said, you're probably going to miscarry. And I mean, I'll tell you, I feel like I tear up thinking about it because she's diabetic. She also had a drop of blood sugar. She goes, I need to sit down. I saw the shock on her face. My heart broke for her so much. And she went through a journey and eventually decided that she was going to go and try IVF. And they were waiting for her to get her period. It never came. She got pregnant. She had the baby. And then eventually, a couple of months after having her baby, got pregnant again. And now she's on her semester. And it is really an amazing experience to see her doing so well when she had so many things going against her. And also after seeing her go through that struggle, really that heartache, and then come through and still being able to conceive and have her baby. And I really love her personally. Certain patients, you just feel like they give you maybe more than you give them. But her story is just so inspiring and amazing. And she's so strong and just a beautiful person.
yeah, we fall in love with our clients so often, or at least I do. I don't know about
Yeah.
you, but
Oh,
I
yeah.
feel like that's a
Oh,
normal
absolutely.
thing for us. It's like, oh, we love you so much. We want to see this for
Yeah.
you, you know? It's so beautiful. Well, thank you for sharing. That sounds amazing. And I'm so happy that she had you on her team.
It was really an honor for me. That's how I see it.
Lovely. Well, it's been lovely to chat with you. Is there any words of wisdom or things that you would like to say to our listeners for today? And then I know that you'll be back for the rest of the week giving amazing tips. So make sure y'all tune in for those.
Absolutely. My biggest thing to say is trust the wisdom of your body because it is wise, it's intelligent, it was designed that way. It's designed to communicate with you, and it does so all the time. And the more you trust it, the more it will express itself to you. That's just how it works. So trust in the wisdom of your body. And I mean that even when you're going on, like interviewing doctors and your body tells you something's not right with what they just said, trust the wisdom of your body. It will never take you in the wrong direction.
I love that. I love that so much. It's so beautiful. And absolutely, I say this all the time to even people that we're talking to are maybe thinking about working with me and aren't totally sure. And I'll be like, you know what? This is not a sales conversation. Go listen to your intuition. And if your intuition tells you that you're the right fit and you want to work with me, great. If it tells you to go somewhere else, great.
Yes,
let's follow
totally.
your intuition.
Yes.
Because it's the intuition that's really, we were talking a little bit before, we kind of disconnect from it, and there is an inherent experience that I think our culture just leads us to, which is, oh, women, it's not your intuition, you're just crazy. It's your hormones or whatever.
Right.
But
it's like gaslighting. Yeah.
Yeah. And we're taught to disconnect from it at such an early age. But I feel like I was going to ask you if you have kids. I should not.
I do. It's okay. Yeah, I do.
So we have a 4-year-old, and it's so fascinating to me how much he's super in tune. He can feel. My partner was saying to me the other day, he said, he came up to me out of nowhere. Nothing happened. But my partner is going through some stuff. And he was like, Dad, can I give you a hug?
Oh, totally. They do that.
Nowhere.
Yes. Yeah.
Do you need a hug,
sweet.
Dad? It's just like, oh,
yeah.
yes. And it's our intuition is, we all have it, men and women. And I feel like women, when we're reconnecting to that reproductive area, that intuition is going to get stronger and stronger. And it's so important, like you just said, Michelle, to listen to your bodies, listen to that wisdom. Thank you. That's such a beautiful note to end on.
Of course. And thank you so much for having me on today.
Yes, it's been lovely. I can't wait to hear your tips. So thank you so much, everybody. We'll see you for the rest of the week with amazing tips from Michelle Oravitz. Was that an amazing episode or what? Make sure to check our show notes so that you can link up with our guests. And if you're not a part of our secret Fertile AF community, you can join for free via the link in our show notes. Last but not least, have you showed us some love lately? It would mean the world to us if you could share and review our podcast. Thank you so much. We'll see you next time on Egg Meets Sperm. Peace.